This is the Influencer Entrepreneurs Podcast with Jenny Melrose, where I strategize with business owners on how to grow and scale their businesses to hit their income goals. This is episode 254 of the Influencer Entrepreneurs Podcast with Jenny Melrose. Today, we're going to be talking about how to curate content for social media with Ben Dell of Missinglettr. I am so excited because this is a sponsored podcast episode, but it is one of my absolute favorite interviews because Ben really shows us the importance of curating content. It kind of gave me an epiphany and brought me back to a time when we used to rise up as a community and support each other. And that's exactly what Missinglettr is going to be able to help you do. Plus, it's going to automate your social media sharing. Let's dive into this episode. Hi, Ben. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Jenny. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I am so excited to really dive into this conversation. But before we get into it, will you introduce yourself and your business?
Sure. So I'm the founder at Missinglettr. Missinglettr, in a nutshell, is a social media management platform, but designed specifically for content creators. Whether you're a content-focused team or whether you're a creator, a solo creator, publishing blog posts, writing, sharing information with your audience through videos, we help creators promote their content across social media.
Okay, perfect. So I love that that's where your business goes, because I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions about curating content, because I think as bloggers, influencers, we get overwhelmed with all that we have to put out. So let's start from the very beginning. When I say I want to curate content, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting question, and it's a good grounding kind of question to start with, because it as with anything, these buzzwords can sometimes create this perception of it being something far more complicated than it perhaps is. And the reality, as far as I see it anyway, is curation is nothing more than sharing knowledge with your audience. And there are different, when you think of it in that sense, there are different ways to do that. We have people who will have a newsletter, an email newsletter, and they'll share kind of hot tips and articles and content that they found within, a topic of interest that they know their audience likes, and they distribute it through an email. That is curation. Others will do it through social. They will share the best tweets and Facebook posts and linked, blog posts or videos. They'll share it across their social audience. That is also curation. To a certain extent, running virtual summits is also curation in the sense that you are the curator, the person who is bringing together a spectrum of knowledge and content from other people, and you're sharing that with your audience. But the key point really, when we come back to it, is just to recognize that it is about sharing knowledge/value with your audience. And that can be a really powerful kind of connection to have with your audience, because you get to be seen as kind of the arbiter of knowledge within your space, and a thought leader, if you will, and therefore a trusted resource. So if done right, it can be a really powerful tool to connect with your audience.
I love that definition, because I think there's been like shifts over the years where when I first started 2009, dinosaurs roamed the earth of the internet, of course, but there was a lot of that. It was a lot of supporting each other and more of community within your niche, even though you could be considered competitors. And then I feel like it kind of had a shift, came like 2015, 16, where it was very much egotistical. They were putting out only their content. And now I'm starting to see again a shift of putting out other people's content that are seen as a resource, even if it could be seen as almost competition to yourself. If it's a resource that could continue to help your audience, it's being shared again, which I just think is fabulous and such an important part of what we do on social media.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And first of all, it talks to kind of trends just ebbing and flowing. And as you say, it's always cyclical, isn't it, with these things, whether it's fashion or whether it's kind of trends within technology. So recognizing that, I think, is important. But I think it's also fundamentally kind of driven by this notion that we're in this world now where we are hyper connected. There is so much information at your fingertips. To think as a brand, as a business, that people aren't going to get information from elsewhere, they're not going to try and get information from elsewhere, is somewhat naive. There is so much information out there, and so it's the more we can share with our audience across a broad sort of topic or a niche topic, whatever that topic of interest is for your audience. I think it really helps deepen that sort of relationship with them. And if you can be seen as the person that's sharing it, they're not going to go elsewhere. They don't need to then go elsewhere to find it. And if we take a simple analogy, like, you create pet food, you might start off thinking, well, I'm just going to talk about my pet food products and that's it. But actually, people will get pretty despondent with that, I think, after a while, because they'll see it as a one-dimensional communication kind of relationship. And they're already going elsewhere to find other bits of information about things they care about: pet toys, pet beds, pet veterinaries, and all those sorts of things. So if you can start sharing those things as well, there's less and less of a need for them to go out elsewhere to get that information. And again, they just start seeing you as a really powerful means for that information.
I think I hear one of the most common things I hear often from my audience is that there's so many people putting out so much information, and they all are experts, that you never know who is kind of full of it and who's not. But when you have someone that you actually trust that is saying, okay, this person's your person for this, and this person's your person for this, it just becomes so much more reliable and beneficial all around, that you can kind of almost create that tribe within your own niche of creating content.
Yeah, you're right. And it would be wrong to think, oh, cool, this thing we're talking about here, curation, sounds really effective. Let's just share lots of stuff. Because you're right, no, that is noise, and potentially a big percentage of that stuff that you're sharing is probably not going to be great quality. So you're right, you need to really kind of make sure that what you're sharing is of worth, that it's relevant, first of all, but also the quality is there. And what it sounds like you're alluding to there is almost kind of following influencers or sort of complementary businesses in your space. And if you know that they are of a high quality, then just sort of looking out for what they do and sharing some of the things that, not necessarily everything, but sharing some of the things that you think might resonate with your audience, with them.
Yes. So I know some of my food bloggers that are listening are probably saying, but I can see how this works for you, Jenny, because you can share someone that talks about Instagram. You can share someone that talks about another TikTok, whatever it might be. So for a food blogger trying to look at someone that's creating their own recipes and is in, let's say, like creating gluten-free recipes, but maybe they have someone that is vegan and also gluten-free, and they're getting that kind of feedback and they don't want to create vegan recipes themselves. That's where I think we're talking about being able to curate this content of like, you're the expert within gluten-free. Who else is creating content that your people are asking for that you can send them to as a resource? So I just try to give as many examples as possible, because I know they listen to me and they're like, oh, it's so easy for you. But we want to make it so that definitely works. So when we are looking to curate content in our niche, how can we find exceptional content to share without wasting hours trying to search for it?
So first of all, I think what you just said there was a really good sort of shortcut trick almost to try and find content that is complementary to yours. So I think hopefully what your superpower is, what your niche is. Let's take the gluten-free, for example. So if you are creating recipes around gluten-free, I think, if you're in that space, you will know intuitively straight away 3 or 4 kind of sub genres related to that aren't going to, to use excuse the pun, kind of eat your business, but will complement it. So whether it's gluten with vegan or gluten with, so-and-so, or just, some other kind of sort of dietary kind of focus, you will know that your audience probably cares about those sorts of topics. And so they become obvious sort of complementary niches, let's call it that, that you can then share. The trick then is in terms of how do you find that content, once you've chosen the topics, is then to find 2 or 3 to start with, influencers in those sort of complementary niches, and start off by sharing theirs. And actually, by being really narrow in your focus, it makes the job easier, because you're not kind of going, let's scour the whole web and find the best recipes. No, actually, you're saying, I've handpicked 2 or 3 influencers in this related niche, let's say veganism. And that makes it easier to find their content. But actually what you're also doing is you're building relationships just, without even thinking. You're building relationships with those influencers. And actually what you'll find over time is that they start, you pop up on their radar and then they start sharing your content. And so not only are you creating more value for your audience, but over time, your content gets a new audience by having its distribution increased because other influencers start sharing your stuff. So yeah, start off small, but intentional.
Yes. So I love this because it's actually something that popped up in my Instagram feed this morning as I follow Brock Johnson on Instagram for his tips about Reels. And he actually did a post yesterday about the ideal Instagrammer. And what he did, it was so interesting because he created this graphic where then the ideal Instagrammer was made up of all of these other influencers within space, a copywriter, someone that pushes you for mindset, someone that's going to talk to you about fun, interactive reels. And he tagged then all of these people within this post. So like you said, they now are going to do the same thing for him. They're going to continue to share his while he is continuing to share theirs. So just create such a great relationship. And I feel like this is what used to happen. And I think we got away from it because of some of the platforms, the way that they were so focused on driving traffic and getting people just to your site, Pinterest in particular. But now that we're starting to really focus on building the community, this is such a good conversation to be having right now. So one of the questions that I have is each of the social media platforms often have different expectations for what performs well. So it makes repurposing the content sometimes feel a little daunting. Do you recommend specific sizes on images or length of copy for each platform?
Yeah, and I think there's nothing groundbreaking in what I'll say here. I think we kind of all know what those, we know because it's published, those social networks will publish, and quite clearly what those sort of recommendations are. So to the more explicit 280 character limit on Twitter, to the, now 3,000 limit on LinkedIn. We've got some clear cut kind of distinctions like that. And then we've got some, from a media standpoint, obviously Instagram is kind of more your square photos, although they do a few others. But most networks do still favor imagery. But this is obvious stuff. But I think the key thing to really bear in mind is that each network will require just a teeny bit of extra finesse and thought, so that you're just, and some of the changes will be quite minor, but they will be such that it will just resonate a little bit more with that audience. And quite often it's the case that you need to experiment a little bit, because even though there might be a, in inverted quotes, recommended way to do it across, let's say, LinkedIn, that might change from one audience to another. So your audience on LinkedIn might respond very differently to my audience on LinkedIn. So really, it's less about being dogmatic about, I must do it this over here and this over there because so-and-so tells me that that's the best thing. I think instead, the mindset is, I need to be probably changing my strategy for each network. Let me experiment to find out which one works the best. What resonates the most? Does it actually translate that longer form content on, say, Facebook and LinkedIn works better than, say, short content? Try it out, see what works, and then try and apply that each time that you publish things on those social networks.
So one of the things that I really liked that you said, and you used the example of LinkedIn, because you said if your audience responds a different way on certain platforms than yours might. Well, back of my head went, my people they don't use LinkedIn that way. They're not really even there on LinkedIn. So I think that that's important too, is that when you're trying to repurpose content, not having to be everywhere, finding those platforms where your people are and creating content there that curates this wealth of information that they just see you as the expert there. And that's where they're going to go for your content.
Yeah, the basic rule here, I think, is to get into as many channels, so social networks, as makes sense. And this is where you just need to sort of apply some common sense, because you're right, in the kind of the food blogging kind of space, I would be really surprised, as you said, and this is why I use that example, I'd be really surprised if LinkedIn would have any audience there. So apply some common sense. You want to be everywhere where there is some audience, even if it's just 10% are on Twitter. it's still worth being there, because with platforms like Missinglettr and other ones, it's so easy to kind of get things across all of them. But when it goes like 0% or 0.1%, like I would imagine LinkedIn is for this particular niche, just don't bother. It is just a distraction at that point.
Yeah, I definitely agree. When it comes to actually putting out content on social media, is there a way to broaden our reach, such as time of day or number of posts going out at a time? Anything like that you have found?
So time of day is good, and it's worth doing. So in Missinglettr, we have we automatically create time slots for you based on when we see the most engagement. Most social media platforms will do that. So if they do, whatever you're using, make sure you've activated that option, because with these things, it's kind of 1% increase of impact with each of these little things that you do, if you think of it that way. So if you have the option in the social media tool that you use to have the time slots automatically updated and dynamic based on when you're getting engagement, turn that on, because that will give you a little jump. Frequency is also good, in the sense that, let's just remember that timelines within social media accounts are fast-paced, fast-moving things. We do it ourselves as consumers. We're flicking through rapidly, and it's very easy for us to miss things. But then when you factor in the fact that some of these networks have their own AI as well, and so sometimes they won't even show it to a person because they just think they're not going to see it, or a geographic restriction or whatever. So there's multiple reasons why people will just miss your content. So there are two things I think we can do to help us combat that issue. One is to post with relative regularity. So, and it will change from network to network, but let's just take Twitter as an example. 3 or 4 times a day is probably a good sweet spot. But then the other thing we can do is to make sure that when we're sharing our own content, so our blog posts, our YouTube videos, whatever it might be, don't just do it once. So if we publish a blog post, don't, and well done if you do remember this. I mean, but you could still do a lot more. And most people don't even remember to send one tweet or one Facebook post when they publish a blog post. They think, I published it, good, that's it. That's all I need to do. I can move on to the next blog post. So if you're remembering to send a message to your audience on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you happen to be, once you publish a blog post, fantastic. But don't stop there is the advice I would give. Come up with a schedule that maybe drips out a different tweet or a different Facebook post, but linking back to that same blog post over a 12-month period, perhaps even longer. Because what you'll see is you'll just sort of drag out that time span with which you can kind of generate clicks and that all important traffic back to your site. So really that for me is the most important thing. Just being comfortable that a single post in and of itself may well have a better chance. So let me rephrase that. A single post is more likely to get not seen than it will be seen. I think this is just the reality. Yes, you'll every now and again have something that goes viral and brilliant. But most of the time it will get lost. And so coming up with a strategy that just broadens out that exposure, as I say, a 12-month long campaign for each blog post, for example, is a really sensible, clever way of increasing the chances that your past and your future followers will see that content and engage with it.
I think that's something that a lot of my listeners struggle with, because they feel like they're putting it out there, they're promoting it once and it should be done, because they feel like then they're repeating themselves, or they're feeling like they're giving their people too much information. They're going to be seen as spammy because they're continuing to talk about it. When I think you made such an important point. Most people don't see it anyways because of the algorithm. Yeah. So you have to put it out there so many times. I think the first time I realized this, I had a client of mine that was actually a coaching client that was also a student of my course, that I had a podcast for over a year, and she saw something and reached out to me and was like, I didn't know you had a podcast. And all I could think was, how could you not know this? Like, your client, your coaching, there's all these things, all these touches that I feel like there's plenty of information getting out there. You have to know this, when in reality, they're just not seeing it. So being able to reuse that content, especially for content creators that have content going back years. I mean, when I had my blog, there was 10 years worth of content. It's a lot of content that isn't getting seen because people are also consuming content so different than they did back then. So being able to put it back through, I love that. So you got to tell me, you mentioned Missinglettr. We've kind of talked about, I want to dive into exactly what it does, because I am so excited about this platform. Anything that can make our lives easier so that we can schedule things and it becomes more automatic is always going to be a benefit to us. So please tell us more about how Missinglettr works.
Cool. Well, before I do, I'll just riff off something you just said there. Just a basic sort of rule of thumb. Just remember that almost all of us fail to sell enough. We're not selling enough. So just bear that in mind. To your point before about, I've mentioned my blog post once. I don't want to overdo it. 9 times out of 10, we're not promoting it enough, across the board, whether it's an email to your clients, whether it's a post across social media, whatever it might be. So try and remove that hang up if you do have it, and be a bit more comfortable pushing things out. So there are 3 key kind of aspects to Missinglettr that I think might be interesting to your audience. The first one, we just have a standard, well, not a standard, it's a gorgeous calendar. So the scheduling tool that stands up against any of the social media tools out there, Buffer, Hootsuite, etc. So you can collaborate with the team, plan out your entire kind of weeks or months ahead worth of social content. But that's kind of just that's the table stakes. That's kind of what all the other social media platforms do. We have 2 features that are really key for content creators that stand us apart from the rest. And one is our drip campaigns product, and the other one is Curate. So this ties in really neatly with precisely what we've been talking about. Drip campaigns, in a nutshell, you connect your blog. We pretty much work with all the platforms out there, and we'll monitor your site and detect when you next publish a blog post without you doing anything. So all you do is you publish on WordPress or publish wherever you happen to be publishing your blog posts. We will detect that automatically. We'll pull down that blog post, rip it apart in a technical sense, and we'll pull out some interesting quotes and phrases that we think will work well socially. We'll recommend hashtags. We'll extract any imagery that you've put up there. We'll generate branded imagery for you as well with nice little quote bubble style call out images. And we take all of that, those media assets, if you will, and we turn it into a 12-month long social media campaign. And within about 2 or 3 minutes of you having published that blog post, you'll get an email from us automatically saying, bang, here we go. Click the link. We've got a campaign ready for you to review. And all you need to do is just maybe cycle through the different quotes if you have a preference over quotes, maybe change an image if you want to. Most people, they just review what we've suggested. They like what we've suggested. The system learns over time what you like and what you don't. And then you click go. And then it will then drip out those social posts, driving traffic back to that original blog post over the next 12 months. And you can change the schedules if you want. If you want it to be a 2-year campaign or a 6-week campaign, you can decide how you want to do that. So this is per blog post. We actually have an integration now for YouTube and also Wistia. So if you're heavy into the videos, then we will detect videos automatically. As long as you have captions, we'll use those to drive and create those social media content. So it's essentially within 2 minutes, 2 clicks almost, you'll have 12 months worth of social content for each blog post you create, so that you don't have to think about the promotional side of it, and you can genuinely get back to writing that next blog post. So that's drip campaigns. The second piece, yep, go on, yeah.
You got to stop there, because that is, and even looking through and going through the software myself and I didn't understand that. I didn't understand it was automatically done for me. I thought I still was going to have to write the copy, create the images, but you're saying that your software pulls it. So my question becomes, how are we connecting it? How does Missinglettr connect to our websites? Is it a plugin or something like that? Or how is it talking?
In terms of how do we monitor, how do we detect when you publish a blog post? It's through an RSS feed, which 9 times out of 10, blogs will have them. If you don't talk to our support team, we can give you some advice in terms of setting it up. Even if you don't have an RSS feed and you don't care to activate that plugin, which is mostly the case of how you would connect one, you can manually create campaigns just by providing the URL to the blog post. So there's lots of ways around it.
Okay. All right. So that's amazing, because that just saves hours upon hours of time of creating our own content. So now you were going to tell us about curating. So how would that...
So curate, so all those things, those principles that we've spoken about regarding curation and why it's important and how you do it, and the benefit of sharing other influencers in your niche, with your audience, but also to have those influencers then share your content. These things we've kind of bottled up into a product within Missinglettr called Curate. And essentially it does both those things. So think of it as a two-sided coin, as all coins are, I suppose. So there's two sides to the same coin, let's say. On the one side, it's a directory based on your unique profile. So you can set up the categories, subcategories, topics, niches, tags, languages. You define your criteria. And based on that, we will recommend to you curated content that we think your audience will like. And within a couple of clicks, you can just be adding those pieces of content, those pre-written social posts, essentially linking to some valuable content, whether it's a blog post, a video, or anything else. You can quickly add them to your calendar, which will then get sent out by Missinglettr to the social accounts that you wish. Of course, you can edit the text if you prefer to. You can swap things out if you want to. You've got full control over those sorts of things. But it's a discovery engine to find meaningful content to share with your audience. And then we flip the coin around. The other side of that coin is, well, now that we've got this powerful directory and discovery engine, you might be asking, well, how do I get my content into that discovery engine? So other Missinglettr users, we have over 30,000 of them, can find my content to then share with their audience. So how can I get my content in front of influencers so that I can then broaden that to that audience? And so that's the other side of the coin. If you've ever created a Facebook advert, the interface and the approach, if you will, is somewhat similar, where you build your audience. So you will first of all compose the creative. So in this case, the social post. You will provide the URL to the content that you're linking to, whether it's a video, blog post, ebook, whatever it happens to be. You can create custom versions of that per social account. So one for Facebook, one for Twitter, just so that when other people do then share it, you can be, you're creating that creative once, if you will. And then if 10,000 people share it, you've got all of those different carefully crafted Facebook versions going out and Twitter versions going out and LinkedIn, if you happen to be on there. But you're also building an audience. So you're choosing the criteria, the demographics, almost the countries, the tags and topics, and that will help you understand what your potential target audience might be in terms of volume, which could be really interesting. Just like you would see if you were doing a Facebook ad, you'd see that barometer where it will tell you, cool, based on your demographics, you're going to get it. This could potentially be seen by 20 million people. We expect about 20 clicks a day or something like that. So you have a similar kind of mindset and approach there. But fundamentally, once you've composed that creative, maybe added an image to it, you've designed those social posts, you've clicked publish, that's now in our Missinglettr Curate library. And then other people can then discover it. And you'll quite soon get shares and clicks as a result.
Does the automatic that you're pulling from the RSS feed that we are then using as a drip campaign also go into that possibility of being put out into that Curate where other people within Missinglettr can also share?
Yeah, good question. So there is a bit of a workflow there. So if we've detected a blog post and turned it into a campaign, and then you've approved that campaign, by going through that campaign approval process, you have in effect approved social posts, a year's worth of social posts. So now when you come to Curate within the platform and you choose to add a new post to promote, you'll be asked a question. Do you want to just create something from scratch in the way I've just described? Or do you want to start off from a post that you've already approved from a drip campaign within the platform? So this is the power of having a suite of tools all geared around content teams and content sort of needs. You can do that in a couple of clicks. So you will choose a previous campaign, choose one of those social posts, and then that becomes the starting point. You can tweak it if you want to, if you need to do any further changes. But that becomes the starting point if you wish. So yeah, there's a bit of a workflow.
Okay. So platforms that it connects that Missinglettr uses, I know LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
Yep. So all your foodies out there, LinkedIn. No, I'm joking. So yes, LinkedIn, yes, Twitter, Facebook, so pages and groups, Instagram, and then just literally 2 days ago, we launched with Google My Business as well.
Okay, so my favorite platform, and my listeners are going, yep, this is what we wanted you to ask, Jenny, is Instagram. So because Instagram is so many features within Instagram. So are you going to the feed? Do you do stories? Do you do reels? What does that look like? So
we don't do stories and reels yet. It's something that we have in our roadmap to do at some point. There's no specific date at this stage. So it's primarily just standard sort of posts. But Instagram is an interesting one, isn't it? Because you obviously can't have clickable links within the comments. And so it is obviously a much more image focused, which clearly will work well in your sort of space. But this is where crafting a post that you then add to the Curate library works in your favor, because you can customize what you want to be sent out to Instagram specifically for that, knowing that actually it doesn't need a link, or it maybe does have a link, but done in a different way. Or maybe I'm going to have the image be something a bit more branded. So you can kind of craft things based on how you feel things will work.
Okay. All right. That makes a ton of sense. Yeah. And I'm really interested to see the stories and reels too, because I think that's a big piece of that curating for your community. I think is I find myself sharing more stories and more reels in my stories for the people that are already following me of others, because that's where I'm really talking to my communities within those stories. But I mean, there's so many features that you guys are already covering and saving us so much time by making it automatic and finding other resources that we can then curate and put out for our audience. So I just love it. We are going to make sure that we link to your website in the show notes, but it is missinglettr.com. The E at the end of letter is missing. So I love that.
There is a missing letter in it. Yes, we attempted to be clever many years ago, and I'm stung with that every time I have to spell it out. But there we go. Once you know, you know. It's a secret club. I saw it and just giggled as soon as I saw it. I'm like, that is perfect. So other than the website, where are the best places to maybe ask a question, to connect with you? So if there's a question, head to our site, the URL that will be in the show notes. You can reach out to our support team there. I can personally be followed on Twitter if you so care, at Ben Dell, BenDell. But for anything Missinglettr, the main website and our support team from there is definitely the best place to go.
Perfect. Well, Ben, this was a fabulous conversation. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with my audience.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Of course.
All right. I am hoping you're just as excited as I am about Missinglettr. It is going to make your life so much easier to be able to not only create content, curate content from some of the experts that are in your industry, like we talked about in this episode, but also automate your social media and not having to have so many touches on it and actually create content. You could clearly tell that I was a bit surprised about this piece that the software actually offers. So you guys, make sure you send me a DM at Jenny_Melrose, and I will make sure to send you all the info on Missinglettr so that you can get in there today and start saving yourself time and, of course, money in the end. Now, before we go, I want to make sure that I thank all of you that have already left a review on your favorite podcasting app. And if you have not, I would so appreciate it if you would. It helps to find great guests and new software, just like Missinglettr, that I was unaware of until they reached out to me and said, hey, we'd love to be able to talk to your podcast audience about our product. They knew you all were a perfect fit, and they knew that and trusted me to be able to bring that to you because of the reviews that you all leave. So I appreciate it so much when you take the time to do so. All right, you guys, until next time, I will see you all then.